Welcome to this tactical analysis of the Wolfsburg versus Roma game in the UEFA Women's Champions League. We're going to have a look at Wolfsburg's 3-2-3-2 press, the movement of their wide midfielders and fullbacks in midfield possession, as well as Roma's pressing variations, clever midfield movement, and set-piece routines. Starting here with Wolfsburg building up in a 2-3 shape, although you could argue it's not a 2-3 because Wilms pushes extremely high on that right-hand side into a right wing position, allowing Hoot to be able to tuck inside and potentially providing another option for the defensive unit when Wolfsburg decide to go long. So at this point, Wolfsburg have gone long into Pop, who's playing initially as a left winger, dropping deep here as a focal point for those defenders. She also swapped with Payol, so sometimes Payol would go out into that left wing, sometimes Pop would. The player tracking her here is Veninger, the right-sided centre-back. So this is a good example of just how aggressive the Roma defenders could be. Before moving on with that scenario in the 12th minute, I'd like to mention that Roma changed their press briefly in the 67th minute to what looked like a 3-2-4-1, but then reverted back to their 3-2-3-2 shape. And as the game progressed, they made their substitutions in the 70th minute onwards. Having Haug and Lazaro as your centre forwards, there was more of an onus on the Roma centre forwards preventing passes into Veninger, but then also into Janssen. This turned out to be quite a good means of making build-up more awkward for Wolfsburg because of how high Wilms pushed up on that right-hand side. Getting back to the 12th minute, from that long ball that Pop and also Jons Tier weren't able to control, you see Wolfsburg immediately looking to counter-press. So you see that with Payol, you see that with Hoot being your far-sided right winger looking to test Roma's defensive unit. Counter-pressing was key for both teams, but as we'll show, because Wolfsburg eventually become more dominant, they're the ones that have more opportunity to do so. Before moving on, Jons Tier came on for Ruud, who got injured relatively early. Initially, she was floating between the lines, with Latvain pushing up almost to become another centre forward, at least when they crossed it into the box. Otherwise, she'd be more on the edge of the box, with Oberdorf being the holding midfielder. See also Wilms looking to retreat back. As we mentioned, she liked to get as high as possible during that deep build-up. And so, successful counter-press by Wolfsburg, with Latvain able to play it here into Hoot, with Wolfsburg players making counter-attacking runs beyond her. We've got here Pop, Jonter making her favourite run from out to in, running into that central space. So here, Wolfsburg are now the ones looking to try and counter-press. We've got that with both our centre-back as well as our centre midfielders. When they weren't counter-pressing, it was more of a 4-4-2 shape or a 4-5-1 shape, but in the 4-4-2, then Andresa would become a second centre forward. And so Wolfsburg play the ball out into Jons Tier here, and I just wanted to point out here Rausch, her as well as the other fullback Wilms were constantly looking to get into attacking positions, whether that was running on the outside or underlapping, although typically Wilms would take overlapping runs or just hold a right wing position, which would then allow Hoot to take more of a narrower position. Similarly, Jons Tier also like to occasionally take narrow positions, allowing Rausch to be able to overlap or underlap her. Given just how aggressive the Wolfsburg fullbacks were, that did mean there was space in behind for Harvey and Gliona. But with Latvain and Oberdorf, but especially Oberdorf covering, it did make it relatively difficult for them to be able to play those killer passes. And we see with Wolfsburg beginning to stamp their authority on the game, Roma are looking to try and counter-attack, and as mentioned, into the spaces left behind by the aggressive positioning of the Wolfsburg fullbacks. But Oberdorf was having none of that and put in a tactical foul. Another string in Wolfsburg's attacking bow is Janssen's early through balls on regaining possession. This is especially with the likes of Payol and Jons Tier in your front line, and with Jons Tier constantly looking to take up a counter-attacking, more narrow central position. This was a great avenue of attack for Wolfsburg. Roma also built up in a 2-3 deep, with Gugliano as the holding midfielder, or potentially Gregi, and then you had your two wide centre midfielders, so Gregi and Andresa, pushing quite high and wide so that they could support the forwards when Roma looked to play that longer ball. This was against Wolfsburg's 3-2-3-2 press, with here Jons Tier pushing up and Rausch supporting her and looking to try and press out towards the fullback with Pop as your CAM. After Roma have sucked Wolfsburg up the pitch, they play a long ball into the space between the lines. Here for Andresa, as I mentioned, slightly inclined here to the right-hand side. Of course, she's immediately pressured here by Oberdorf, who wins the header. Off Oberdorf's header, Roma are able to regain possession, but due to pressure from Oberdorf and Latvain, they're forced to reset. This allows Wolfsburg to move into their more typical defensive shape, which is a 4-1-4-1. Here we have Oberdorf pushing higher, but typically she'll be the one deeper with Lapvine pushing higher. When Roma were playing from these deeper positions, they did like to go around the Wolfsburg players and into the channels with their forwards, and in this case Gliona dropping to try and link with her fullback. This draws out the Wolfsburg fullback, and in behind, the rest of the Wolfsburg defense are forced to pull narrow towards this side. Roma on a few occasions used this to then switch the ball over to the far side, typically from right to left, for Harvey to be able to have a 1v1 against Willems on the left hand side. Notice also the positions of the Roma centre midfielders. They were really clever in their movement, typically moving in such a way as to draw the Wolfsburg midfielders away from where they wanted a forward to drop, basically creating a passing channel into the forwards. Fortunately for Giacinti here, she's tracked by Janssen and slips, so she's not able to link with Gliona in this wide right hand side space. We also have to mention Roma's corner kicks. Typically they like to double up against a sole Wolfsburg defender because this allowed them to be able to change the crossing angle or drive down the touchline. They also really liked to attack the near post with a shot or a cross, and Bartoli, their captain and right back, liked to also position herself on the near post to try and attack or flick on the ball. Big fan of this scenario in the 78th minute of a Wolfsburg throw-in. They're able to switch play towards their left-hand side. At this point, we've had a number of substitutions, but regardless, the play is still the same. Lapvine here is staying a little bit deeper than earlier with Hegering as the CDM, playing the Oberdorf role. Initially, your fullbacks are staying deep here. Hoot has narrowed, with Brand and Vasmuth leading the line. Roma are trying to play a 4-4-1-1 against out of possession. You see here, one of your CDMs holding, the other pushing up, as well as also your near-sided fullback looking to overlap or underlap. As play develops, we can expect Willems also to push up here, so she's in a counter-pressing position, and Hoot also to push up again, counter-pressing position, but also potential for a shot on the edge of the box. Due to positioning and a little bit of luck, Hegering is able to win the ball after John Stoutier is tackled centrally and immediately recycle the ball out into that left-hand side for now Rausch to cross from the left-hand side, with what is 3 options in the box and 1 on the edge. And with that, thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed the content, consider giving it a like, sharing it on social media, maybe subscribing. If you're into women's football analysis, have a look at our other playlists. And with that, we're out.